The wind blowing from the northeast of the Labrador Sea was battering the barbed wire fences of Camp Ash River at the end of March 1945. The camp was hidden away in the remotest corner of the state of Maine, nestled among vast spruce forests and granite hills. Its name symbolized the Allies' determination to bring the war to a final resolution. But for those brought here, the most uncertain chapter of their lives was just beginning. Stepping down from the back of the military truck, Dr. Anya Kohl smoothed the hem of her cloak, which tightly wrapped her 5-year-old daughter Sophie. Her hair was wavy from the salty dampness of the 3-week sea voyage. Her eyes drifted first to the endless sea of trees, then to the wooden barracks behind the wire. After Prague, then the bombed-out hospitals of Berlin, then the deck of an unidentified transport ship. This silence was almost deafening. The other passengers beside her, mostly men, a few women like her, brought along with their husbands or on their own, gazed around with the same blank bewilderment. They were all people quietly gathered under the shadow of war by a mechanism called the Special Scientific Assignment Program. Enemy brains. Valuable prisoners. "Mom, where are we?" Sophie whispered in a small voice from under her cloak. Her German was mixed with a Prague accent. "I don't know, mein Schatz," Anya replied, uncomfortable with the honesty of her answer. "But we're together. That's what matters." An American sergeant barked orders in broken but understandable German. "Fall into single file. Keep your personal belongings with you. Step forward for registration." Anya slung her rucksack more tightly over her shoulder. Inside were Sophie's only toy, a stuffed rabbit, 2 changes of clothes, a few family photographs, and a yellowed copy of her medical degree. Everything she had learned over the past 2 years at the German occupation hospital in Prague, water boiled for sterilization, reused bandages, the sounds of patients in pain, weighed heavier than the bag itself. At the registration desk sat a middle-aged man wearing a uniform with a doctor's collar badge. His hair was beginning to gray. Deep circles were under his eyes, but his gaze was sharp and analytical. His name was Dr. Elias Vance. "Dr. Kohl," he said, looking at her file. His English was soft, but without accent. "Charles University in Prague. Pediatrics. Is that correct?" "Yes," Anya confirmed, surprised. The detail of her documents was unsettling. "Who is this little lady?" Dr. Vance leaned toward Sophie, looking at the hem of the cloak she was hiding under. "This is my daughter, Sophie." Dr. Vance spoke directly to Sophie in English, slowly and clearly. "Welcome, Sophie. There are lots of trees here, aren't there?" Sophie hid further behind her mother's skirt, not answering. Anya instinctively pulled her back protectively. Vance nodded as if understanding the situation, and turned back to Anya. "We try to keep families together in our camps. You will be assigned a cabin. Tomorrow morning, we expect you at the infirmary for a health check. Your professional background. Interesting." He said the last sentence thoughtfully, as he closed a file. As they walked towards the row of cabins, a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, with carefully braided light blonde hair, approached them. She wore a gray apron and held a small, light yellow cardboard box in her hand. "Welcome," she said cheerfully in English. "I'm Clara. I look after the children. Would you like a snack, little lady?" Clara reached into the box and pulled out a handful of small, O-shaped, golden-colored, thin oat flakes lightly glazed with honey. She offered them to Sophie. Anya held her breath for a moment. What was this propaganda? What was inside? But it was too late. Sophie's eyes were fixed on these unfamiliar, perfectly shaped, sweet-smelling objects in her hand. Hunger overcame fear. Her small fingers reached out and took a few. She popped them into her mouth. They crunched. Then something happened that Anya hadn't seen in months. A pure, astonished delight flashed in Sophie's eyes. Her lips, without her realizing, formed a small smile. "Delicious," Sophie whispered in German. And then, perhaps as her first word in a new language, she looked at the foreign woman and repeated in English, "Delicious." Clara smiled. "We call them honey loops. Children adore them." She pointed to the box. Anya saw the picture on the box, a smiling child holding the same O-shaped cereals. It was a factory-made, packaged food designed specifically for children. At that moment, everything froze in Anya's mind. In the Berlin hospital, she saw how pregnant women and small children were trying to survive on rations consisting of ration cards, diluted milk, and damp, bran-filled bread. Sophie barely knew what the word sweet meant. And here, in the middle of this forest, an enemy was offering her daughter a perfectly shaped, honeyed, flawless snack as if it were the most natural thing in the world. This was not kindness. It was a deep, disturbing luxury. To waste something like this in the 4th year of the war, just to make a child happy, what did that mean? Dr. Elias Vance appeared at the cabin door, having silently observed the scene Clara had created. He noticed the look of shock on Anya's face. He approached, his voice low and close enough for only her to hear. "Dr. Kohl," he said, "here children don't have to go hungry. It's a policy, a matter of dignity." Anya looked into his eyes. Was it propaganda? Was it a soft-spoken speech? But the small golden rings crunching in Sophie's mouth were real, and the rare smile on her daughter's face was more real than any image in a propaganda brochure. The small cabin they entered was clean, with a simple kitchen counter, 2 small beds, and a sitting room with a stove. Larch trees were visible through the window. Sophie took off her cloak and began rummaging through her mother's suitcase, found her cloth rabbit, and sat it on the bed. Anya, meanwhile, stood by the door, still holding the image of that yellow cardboard box in her mind. "Mom," said Sophie, in German, "are there any more of those rings here?" Anya slowly shook her head. "I don't think so, Schatz. But maybe tomorrow?" That night, Anya couldn't sleep. She listened to her daughter's breathing, and those small O-shaped objects kept spinning in her mind. They weren't just food. They were a message. And although Anya Kohl hadn't yet deciphered what that message meant, she knew one thing. This didn't resemble any kind of war she knew from Prague or Berlin. The next morning, the infirmary was the complete opposite of everything Anya remembered from the hospital in Prague. Here, there were smooth steel surfaces, bright lighting, and labeled materials arranged in glass containers. In the air, there was not the sharp smell of disinfectant she knew, but a faint scent of antiseptic and clean sheets. Dr. Elias Vance was waiting for her, wearing a spotless lab coat. "Dr. Kohl, come in." He introduced her to Dr. Felix Brenner, another German doctor, in his 50s, unshaven and looking distracted. He was a neurologist. "Routine checkup," Vance explained, preparing his stethoscope. "To see the effects of the journey. Then, perhaps you could take a look at the children here too. There are a few." During the checkup, Vance's movements were quick and professional, but the disposable, alcohol-soaked cotton pad he used to clean the skin before inserting the needle tip surprised Anya once again. In Berlin, they boiled gauze pads and reused them. Every little detail here seemed to scream the philosophy of single use. It was incredible waste, or proof of incredible abundance. When the inspection was over, Vance said, Now, if you have time, let's take a look at the children. He led him to a small room behind the infirmary. It was a nursery, decorated with brightly colored pictures and filled with small tables and chairs. Inside were 6 children, aged between 2 and 7. 2 were the children of the other scientists who had been brought in. The other 4 looked different. They had darker skin and were whispering in a different language. They weren't European. Clara was among the children. She smiled when she saw Anya. "Dr. Kohl, look, our little guests." Vance noticed the question in Anya's eyes. "The children of the Japanese science delegation," he explained in a calm voice. "They're from a different camp, here for cooperation talks. Here, the children are just children." As Anya's mind processed this information, Sophie entered the infirmary, holding Clara's hand. Seeing the other children, she became a little shy. Clara took the familiar yellow box out of a cupboard and placed a few honey loops in each child's palm. The Japanese children examined this new food with curiosity, then tried one. Their faces showed the same surprised delight as Sophie's had yesterday. At that moment, everything became clear to Anya. This was not just a gesture towards her daughter. It was a systematic practice. The Americans were offering the children of enemy scientists a luxury that most of their own citizens could not even dream of as an everyday snack. Was this a softening tactic or a display of terrifying power? As she wavered between these 2 options, Vance came over to her. "As a mother and a doctor, what do you think, Dr. Kohl?" he asked, looking at the children. "Very generous," Anya murmured, choosing her words carefully. "Isn't it costly while there's a war on?" Vance smiled faintly, but there was a weary look in his eyes. "Here in Maine, there's a company called General Mills in Minneapolis. They make these loops. Their factories are operating above pre-war capacity because the government has contracts to supply food to soldiers and certain civilians. What you see here is not an edict. This is a surplus." He emphasized the last word, surplus. The one it cut through Anya like a knife. In Prague, in Berlin, there was no such thing as surplus. Everything was scarce. Time, food, medicine, hope. The logic here was the exact opposite of the war logic she understood. That evening, in their clubhouse, Sophie was talking to her toy rabbit, while Anya looked out the window at the dark forest. Dr. Felix Brenner came over to light his cigarette. "Your little girl came to the infirmary today," said Brenner, blowing smoke. "She ate those cornflakes things, didn't she?" "Yes," Anya confirmed. Brenner laughed bitterly. "An interesting strategy. They're conquering our children's stomachs, not ours. More effective." "Do you think it's a strategy?" asked Anya, turning to look at him. "Everything is a strategy, Dr. Kohl. Especially here." Brenner flicked the ash from his cigarette. "But to be honest, I'd rather see my daughter's face. Not those posters of starving children with swollen bellies that the propagandists showed us in Berlin." Brenner walked away. Anya pondered his words. It was a strategy, yes, but what kind of strategy? A strategy designed not to destroy the enemy, but to feed his child. This idea didn't fit with anything she had learned in her medical training. A few days later, Sophie began spending time regularly at Clara's nursery. Every afternoon, she brought out the yellow box. One day, Sophie came home with a necklace she had made herself, made of honey loops and string. "Look, Mom! Clara taught me how to do this." Anya took the necklace in her hand. Small, gold-colored rings were strung on a cord. She weighed them in her palm. They were light, but the meaning they carried was much heavier than their weight. That night, After Sophie had fallen asleep, Anya opened her bag and took out the small package of family photographs she had brought from Prague. There was a photo of Sophie, before the war, smiling in front of a birthday cake. The cake had real cream on it. Those days now seemed like they belonged to another life. Now, her daughter's happiness depended on the enemy's gift, the shaped, honeyed oatmeal biscuits. She had to make a decision. Would she resist this luxury, this excess? Would she deprive her daughter of the thing that perhaps for the first time in her life truly satisfied her and made her smile, simply because this gift did not come from the right side? Or would she accept that her first duty as a mother, setting aside propaganda, politics, even her own pride, was to accept what was good for her daughter? From the window, she could see the lights coming from the huts of the other scientists across the camp. Were the other mothers, the other fathers experiencing the same dilemma there? Were these small golden rings conquering not only the children's palms, but also the hearts and minds of the adults? Anya put the photograph back and sat down on the edge of Sophie's bed. Her daughter was murmuring in her sleep. Anya reached out and stroked her soft hair. Did those little honey rings have no nutritional value? Perhaps they did. But what they provided was more valuable than calories, a shred of normality, a childhood memory. And this was what Dr. Anya Kohl had quietly surrendered to tonight, in the dark. The enemy's power to give her daughter back a small piece of childhood. When Anya noticed Sophie's necklace, made from honey loops on the table that morning, she no longer felt any unease. She picked up the necklace and carefully placed it in a drawer. It was a sign of surrender, but also a new beginning. When she returned to the infirmary, Dr. Vance took her straight to the small examination room. On the desk were several brochures written in English and a blank form. "Dr. Kohl, I have a proposal for you," said Vance, sitting down. "We're reviewing child health standards at the camps. Vaccination schedules, nutrition programs. Your experience and perspective would be invaluable. It's not a formal position, consultancy. It would provide a space to work and think." The offer was unexpected. Was it a trap? A method to pull him over to their side? But in Vance's eyes, she saw not the artificial glare of the propaganda brochures, but deep fatigue and practical seriousness. This was an experiment, just like a clinical trial. "What kind of nutrition programs?" Anya asked carefully. Vance pushed one of the brochures towards her. It featured a colorful chart showing daily portions of milk, fruit, vegetables, meat, and grains according to age. It was titled Basic Food Groups for Children. Anya realized she had never seen anything like this, even at the best hospital in Prague. There, nutrition meant eating what was available. "Is this feasible?" she murmured. "It is being implemented at this camp," Vance replied simply. "The supply chain supports it. I want to prove it and document its positive outcomes." This was an offer that went beyond simple cooperation. It would make her part of the system. Anya looked at Vance, then out the window, towards the nursery. Sophie was there. She sensed that those little honey rings were just the beginning. Behind them lay a terrifyingly organized, terrifyingly abundant machine. "I accept," she said, her voice surprisingly clear even to herself. "But on one condition, my work will be for all children, not just the Europeans." A small, approving curve appeared on Vance's lips. That was the plan anyway. The Japanese children here are included in the same program. And so Anya's new ritual began. In the mornings, she joined Vance in the infirmary for the children's examinations, recording weight and height measurements, reviewing their nutritional histories as far as possible. In the afternoons, She spent her time in Vance's office, reading English medical journals and documents from the U.S. Public Health Service. Most of this material was from before the war, but it laid out the fundamentals of the American approach to child health: preventive treatment, regular checkups, nutrition education. The most striking thing was the vaccines. Vance had stockpiled a combined vaccine for diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, DTP, and a smallpox vaccine. They would be administered to all the children in the camp. "Where do these vaccines come from?" Anya asked one day, turning a small glass vial in her hand. "From Philadelphia, from Michigan," replied Vance. "Production continues alongside military needs. The civilian population, especially children, is seen as a national asset." He paused when using the phrase national asset, as if weighing the words. Anya remembered how, in Prague, after the war began, the supply of vaccines had completely stopped. The fear of polio epidemics would grip the city every summer. Here, on enemy soil, these little glass vials were stored on shelves. This was not the power of a hospital, but the priority of a nation. As she tried to digest this information, it was her daily contact with the children that affected her most. The Japanese children, Kenji, a small, serious boy, and his more talkative sister Hana, were shy at first. But Honeyloops and Clara's patient cheerfulness began to break down their walls. One afternoon, Anya heard Sophie showing Hana how to brush her cloth rabbit using a mixture of German and basic English. The two girls were sharing a common language of play. This scene triggered something in his mind. The children here, German, Japanese, were not carrying on their parents' ideological battles. For them, the reality here was not the exams they took or the propaganda they learned, but the snacks Clara gave them, the games they played, and perhaps the vaccinations they would receive. One afternoon, Dr. Felix Brenner came to the infirmary asking for aspirin for a headache. Anya let him in. "I hear the female doctor is now an official of the American health system," said Brenner with an ironic tone. "I monitor the children's health, Dr. Brenner. That's all," replied Anya, trying to maintain her composure. "Ah, of course. How noble." Brenner rolled the aspirin in his palm. "You know, during my last months in Berlin, the light bulbs in our neurology clinic blew out. We performed surgeries by the window in daylight. Here," he pointed to the bright, shadowless light around him, "here, they don't have problems with light bulbs blowing out, because they replace them every month with new, brighter ones." He swallowed the pills. "That was the biggest shock for me. Not the guns or the tanks, the bloody light bulbs." Brenner was gone, but his words remained. Anya thought about the light bulbs. She thought about the honey loops. She thought about the disposable syringes. All of these were different sides of the same coin: renewable abundance. Germany was fighting by consuming its existing resources and consuming people. America, however, was fighting by constantly renewing and even increasing its resources. It was like a war on a different planet. A week later, the first vaccination day arrived. Anya was there to calm the children and help Vance. Sophie stood beside her mother and bravely held out her arm. Her eyes filled when she saw the needle, but she didn't cry. Vance completed the procedure quickly and skillfully, then handed Sophie a sweet. Not filled with honey loops, but still shaped like a bright red apple. "You were a very brave girl," he said. It was Kenji's turn. The child muttered something quickly and fearfully in Japanese. Anya didn't understand, but the tone was familiar. Sophie tugged at her mother's skirt. "Mummy, he's scared." Anya looked first at Vance, then at the little boy. Then, without thinking, she took the honey loop necklace Sophie had made from her drawer. Crouching down, she approached Kenji and showed him the necklace. "Look," she said softly in English, "Sophie made it. You can make one too. But first, this little needle. It's very quick. Then, a sweet for you too." Kenji looked at the shiny golden rings. His tears stopped. Vance took advantage of the opportunity and administered the injection. Kenji only flinched slightly. Anya gave him the necklace. The child took the necklace with a serious expression on his small face and examined it. At that moment, everything became clear to Anya. These honey loops were not just a snack. They were a currency, a symbol of trust, perhaps even a small, molded offer of peace. They were simple enough to be used to overcome fear, universal enough to bridge the gap between a mother and a child, regardless of language or nationality. That night, in her cabin, Anya wrote in her diary. She was now writing in a mixture of English and German. Today I helped vaccinate a child. We conquered his fear with my daughter's toy. At medical school, they taught us that medicine is the most powerful weapon. They were wrong. The most powerful weapon is a small oat ring covered in honey, held in the hand of a child who could understand another child's fear. America mass produces these rings. But us? What did we produce? We produced fear. And now, we are here with this fear, feeding on the abundance of our enemy. We are not here because we are better than their weapons. It is because their capacity to produce compassion is greater. This thought hurts more than anything else. There was a light knock at the door. Outside was Dr. Elias Vance, holding a file. I know it's late, but I wanted to review today's records. And I want to show you something. Anya let him in. Vance placed the file on the table. Inside were early statistics showing the weight and height gains of the children at the camp. They were all positive. "You've done a fine job, Dr. Kohl," he said. Then he took a small, carefully folded newspaper clipping from his pocket. He handed it to Anya. "You might like to see this." The clipping was from the Washington Post, dated a few months earlier. The headline read, "Wartime Prosperity. New cereal products for children take the market by storm." Below, it discussed General Mills' new innovations aimed at making children's nutrition fun and nutritious. Honey loops weren't explicitly mentioned, but that's what it was about. Anya looked at the clipping, then at Vance. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. "Are you trying to prove to me that these snacks aren't just a marketing gimmick, but a national priority?" Vance shook his head. "No. I'm trying to show you that this is unintentional. This isn't a planned psychological operation. It's a natural byproduct of our system. We're manufacturing for war, yes, but we're also manufacturing for the world after the war. And in that world, there are children. We're manufacturing for them too." He paused. "You saw the look on Sophie's face. That look is a priority for us too, not just for you." Anya thought about Vance's words. Unintentional kindness, unplanned mercy. This was far more powerful than any deliberate propaganda campaign, because it was genuine. After Vance left, Anya sat for a long time looking at the newspaper clipping. She listened to Sophie's sleeping sounds. Suddenly, she understood what she had to do. She would not resist. She would try to understand and even use this system for the good of her daughter and all the other children in this camp, because it was part of a reality greater than the war itself, life's insistent desire to continue. And America, at that moment, was the side with the resources to nurture that desire. She, Dr. Anya Kohl, was no longer just a prisoner or a mother. She had become an observer, and perhaps even a participant, in this strange new reality. And she was doing it by following the path shown to her by the small, golden, honey-coated oat rings. Spring transformed the Maine forests into a lush green blanket. The camp routine had also begun to take root. Anya's role in the infirmary became official. Child Health Monitor. It was a meaningless title on paper, but it gave her the freedom to continue her research in the library and the regular checkups of the camp children. She forged stronger bonds with Sophie, Hana, and Kenji. The trio invented complex games at the nursery, mixing German, Japanese, and English words together. Honey loops remained a common flavor point in this linguistic mix. One afternoon, Anya saw the three children stringing honey loops onto blades of grass instead of a string, creating a treasure trove of magic rings. This simple scene of happiness stirred both peace and a twinge within her every time. One morning, Vance handed her a different file. This is part of a medical assessment report based on aerial photographs of German industrial facilities. He said quietly, "Please review it. Pay particular attention to the sections concerning nutrition and public health infrastructure." Anya opened the file. The black and white photographs showed the post-bombing ruins of familiar cities: Hamburg, Cologne, Berlin. But the part Vance pointed to was not the rubble. The report contained cold, analytical estimates of water supply damage, the collapse of sewage systems, and the possible destruction of food storage facilities. As a result, one paragraph stated, "The civilian population, particularly pediatric and geriatric groups, faces the risk of infectious disease outbreaks and widespread malnutrition, stemming from a combination of lack of access to clean water, inadequate sanitation, and critical food shortages." Anya's hands trembled. This was not just a military target. It was a prediction of a health catastrophe. It was a prediction about the situation of Germany's children, Sophie's cousins, her former neighbors. And this report had been written just a few hundred meters away from the happy, vaccinated children in the camp, fed on honey loops. The chasm between the two worlds solidified before her eyes. "Why are you showing me this?" asked Anya, her voice hoarse. "Because you need to understand," replied Vance, his face impassive as ever. "What we're doing here, the vaccinations, nutrition, clean water, isn't just a humanitarian gesture. It's a proactive experiment for the inevitable outcome of war. If the children here remain healthy, it means a population that could be spared the wave of disease that would come with the collapse of a society. For you, it's pediatrics. For me, it's strategic medicine." Anya was shaken by Vance's confession. It was an experiment, and she was part of both the experiment and the control group. The control group were the children living in the ruins in those photographs. That day, she performed her duties in the infirmary mechanically. At dinner, Sophie cheerfully recounted how Hana had taught her a new Japanese word. Anya struggled to hear her daughter's words. Her mind was filled with the grim terms of that report: widespread malnutrition. A few days later, a minor crisis erupted at the camp. Greta Faber, the wife of a German chemist who had been brought in, was taken to the infirmary with a high fever and severe cough. During the examination, Vance's face tensed. They took the patient to an isolated room. That evening, Vance called Anya to his office. "There's a suspicion of tuberculosis," he said, rubbing his forehead. "Probably acquired before the journey, activated by stress and malnutrition." "What shall we do?" asked Anya. In Berlin, the tuberculosis wards were like waiting rooms for death. There was little treatment beyond fresh air and hope. "We'll use streptomycin," Vance said simply. Anya froze. Streptomycin was a brand new, almost legendary antibiotic developed by American researcher Selman Waksman, said to be effective against tuberculosis. In Germany, it was an unattainable miracle, known only by name. "You're going to give that drug to a prisoner?" she whispered. "She's a patient, Dr. Kohl," Vance corrected sharply. "And this camp's health protocol is the same as for our own military personnel. We cannot risk an outbreak. Besides," he paused, "it's a scientific opportunity. We can observe the drug's effectiveness in different populations. Again, the same dichotomy: humanitarian treatment and cold scientific benefit." Greta Faber began treatment the next day. Anya took on the task of bringing food and clean sheets to her isolation room. The woman was filled with fear and bewilderment. "They're going to kill me, aren't they?" Faber whispered one day while Anya was changing the sheets. "No," said Anya, her voice confident. She was surprised by her own conviction. "They're giving you a new drug. It's very powerful. You'll get better." Within a week, Faber's fever had subsided. His cough had eased. The miracle was tangible and observable. This event spread like wildfire among the other adults at the camp, particularly among the scientists' wives. It was tangible proof that America could heal not only its children, but itself. This created a much deeper sense of confidence than the honey loops had provided. However, this confidence was tested with the arrival of a new source: mail. After the war ended and the camps in Europe gradually opened, a limited number of letters finally began to reach Camp Resolution. These letters had passed through strict censorship, but they still bore traces of the truth. Dr. Felix Brenner came into the infirmary reading a letter from a relative in Prague. His face was ashen. "Dr. Kohl," he said, his voice metallic. "Listen, dear Felix, it is a great relief to know you are alive. We are managing. This city water is still undrinkable. We lost Mum last month to typhoid. There are no medical supplies. There isn't even aspirin left in the pharmacies. The children are constantly hungry. They tell us how the Americans treat the prisoners. I hope your situation is better. Hang in there." Brenner placed the letter on the table. "Hang in there," he repeated with a bitter laugh. "I'm not hanging in there here. I'm living. I'm eating hot meals. They're injecting me with streptomycin. And a packet of those shaped cereals your little girl eats could mean a month's worth of food for my niece in Prague." He turned to Anya, his eyes filled with anger and helplessness. "Is this moral, Dr. Kohl? Is this fair?" Anya had no answer. She could only think of Greta Faber's recovering face and Sophie's necklace made of honey loops. The two realities were too cruel to coexist, yet they did. That night, after Sophie fell asleep, Anya received a letter from her family. It was from Prague, written in her mother's handwriting. The letter was short and indirect due to censorship, but the helplessness between the lines was clear. "Our health is good. It's hard to find food. The pharmacies are closed. How lovely to hear Sophie is growing up. Don't worry about her. God protects her." As Anya read the letter, tears fell onto the page. Her mother was happy to hear that her granddaughter was growing up, but she didn't know where or thanks to whom. God protects her. No, what protected her were Dr. Elias Vance's syringes, Clara's yellow boxes, and the vast, indifferent machinery of American agriculture and industry. The next day, when Anya came to the infirmary, Vance was waiting for her in his office. On the desk lay a copy of Brenner's letter. "Did you see that?" asked Vance. "Yes." "This is an unfortunate situation," said Vance, "but it's an expected one. This is the price of war." "This is not a price," Anya burst out, her anger surprising even her. "This is a disconnect. Here you vaccinate your children, feed them honey grains, cure your women with streptomycin. Over there, people, mothers, children, are dying without even aspirin. Are these parts of the same war?" Vance met her anger silently. Yes, he said finally, in a calm but weary voice. Parts of the same war. The only difference is which side managed its resources better. We did, they didn't. That's the result. He slammed his fist on the table. I'm a doctor, Dr. Kohl. I do what I can with the resources I have. The resources here are plentiful. The resources there are scarce. I'm responsible for the ones here. It's that simple. Anya looked at Vance's cold logic with hatred, but at the same time, she respected his honesty. At least he wasn't lying. He admitted it was a strategy, an experiment. What about us? Anya asked, her voice trembling. Are we guinea pigs in this experiment? Is Sophie a guinea pig? No, Vance said, firmly. Sophie is a child, and every child here is an innocent victim of war. What we're doing is giving them not just a chance to survive, but a chance to thrive, a chance Brenner's niece didn't have. It's not fair, Dr. Kohl. Nothing is fair. But that shouldn't stop us from doing what's right. Anya left the office, her mind in turmoil. Was Vance right? Or was this just an excuse to justify a terrible injustice? Did protecting Sophie mean ignoring the suffering of the other children? When she returned to her cabin, Sophie was waiting for her, holding a new work of art, a crown made from honey loops and leaves. Look, Mum, a queen's crown for you. Anya took the crown and placed it on her daughter's head. She saw the pure joy in Sophie's eyes. She would do whatever it took to protect that joy. The niece in Prague, the neighbor's child in Berlin. They were distant, abstract sorrows. Sophie, however, was here, breathing, laughing. In that moment, she understood how painfully true Vance's words were. War divided people not only physically, but also morally. The instinct to protect those close to you from those far away, to protect your loved ones from strangers. America's abundance allowed this instinct to be satisfied. Germany's scarcity made it impossible. That night, she wrote the following in her diary. Today, I read 2 letters. One was about death and absence. The other was about love and lies. Both conveyed the same truth. The world is divided, not between winners and losers, between those who live in abundance and those who die in scarcity. I will do everything to keep Sophie on the side of abundance. Does that make me selfish? Yes. As a mother, I accept that selfishness. Dr. Vance says it's an experiment. I think it's a choice. And I chose the side where Sophie is happy. May God forgive us. The next morning, when she returned to the infirmary, she checked on Greta Faber's room. The woman was sitting in a chair, looking out the window. There was some color in her face. How are you feeling? Anya asked. Better, Faber whispered. Really better, this medicine, it's a miracle. She looked at Anya, her eyes filling with tears. Why are they doing this to me? I'm the enemy. Anya didn't reply for a moment. Then she remembered Vance's words. Perhaps, she said slowly, when the war is over, there won't be any enemies left. Just people trying to heal. And maybe this medicine isn't just healing you, but something else too. Faber seemed not to understand but nodded. Anya went outside. In the corridor, she ran into Felix Brenner. The man gave her a long, meaningful look, then passed silently by. He was no longer mocking her. There was only a look that acknowledged they were both wallowing in the same moral mire. Anya looked out the window at the green forest surrounding the camp. This forest was like a refuge from the world. Outside, the true price of war was being paid. Inside, a prototype of a future, unfair, flawed, but at least possible, was being built. And she was both the architect and the inhabitant of this prototype. both its beneficiary and its observer. Sophie's honey loop crown sat on the kitchen table. The small golden rings were no longer just a snack. They had become symbols of a mother's moral dilemma, of a nation's strength, and of the strangest, most unexpected victory of the war: the smiles of the surviving children. Summer cloaked Camp Resolution's harsh granite and spruce needles in a warm, resinous scent. Greta Faber's recovery with streptomycin sparked an invisible shift among the German adults at the camp. It was becoming harder to view America solely as an enemy or a prison. It was also a life-giving force. This truth planted a deep seed of trust in the skeptical minds of the adults, one that went beyond the innocent acceptance of children like Sophie. This trust became even more complex with the arrival of a new guest. Colonel Robert Bennett came from a medical intelligence unit attached to the War Department. He was a slender, meticulous man, his eyes as weary as Vance's, but much more distant. His purpose was to assess the health and integration potential of the camp's special personnel. No one openly called them prisoners anymore. Bennett caught Anya in the office reviewing child health statistics. "Dr. Kohl," he said, his voice neutral and professional. "Your name comes up frequently in Dr. Vance's reports. Your work is impressive." "Thank you," Anya murmured cautiously. "In particular, the rapid adaptation of the pediatric vaccination program is noteworthy, and this thing they call honey loop has been noted to help establish social bonds among children." Bennett glanced at a notebook. "Do you think this could be a worthwhile topic for research on the psychological effects of a food product?" Anya felt a chill inside. Sophie's happiness, the friendship she had built with Hannah and Kenji, was now being analyzed as a psychological effect in a military intelligence report. "I'm a pediatric, Colonel Bennett, not a psychologist. I can say that children are happier when they're not hungry and protected from disease. It's that simple." Bennett nodded with a slight smile, indicating he hadn't taken note of Anya's response. "Of course, simple things are often the most effective." Then he changed his tone. "Dr. Kohl, what are your long-term plans? When the war is over, where could your knowledge and experience here be used?" The question hung in the air. Anya had never thought about it that way. Her long-term plans went no further than thinking about Sophie's next meal and her next vaccination. "I don't know," she admitted. "I want to go back to my family, to Prague." "Prague," Bennett murmured, as if searching for the city's name on a map. "An interesting place. Rebuilding it will take decades. The healthcare infrastructure, it will have to start from scratch." He looked at Anya. "The knowledge you've gained here, modern pediatrics, vaccination protocols, preventive medicine, would be invaluable there. Of course, if you have the resources to implement it." The message was clear. She would have nothing in Prague. Here, however, she had knowledge. Vance had entered the room quietly and was listening to the conversation. "Colonel, Dr. Kohl's work isn't finished yet," Vance interjected. "Our pediatric observation program will continue for at least another 6 months." Of course," Bennett agreed, seemingly realizing Vance was protecting Anya. "It's just, we're thinking about the future, for all of us." Bennett's visit created new tension in the camp. Rumors of long-term plans spread among the scientists and their families. Some hoped it signaled a promise of release. Others feared it pointed to a more permanent stay. In this atmosphere of uncertainty, Anya tried to protect Sophie as much as possible. But one afternoon, Sophie asked her an unexpected question. "Mum, when are we going home?" The question caught Anya off guard. Prague was now a hazy, almost fairy tale place. Home was this cabin, this infirmary, Clara's honey loops. "I don't know, Schatz," she said sincerely. "But for now, this is our home. Is that all right?" Sophie thought for a moment, then nodded. "It's fine. Hannah is here, and Kenji, and the honey loops." The child's simple logic reassured Anya. Sophie had tied her sense of belonging to people and small rituals, not to places on maps. Perhaps this was the only way to build a new life. This idea was put to the test on a hot day in August, when tragedy struck. There was a fault in the camp's electrical transformer, and the power went out for several hours. The cold storage units stopped working. Some medicines in the infirmary, and worse still, the milk and meat stocks in the kitchen, were at risk. Vance called an emergency meeting. The electricity will be repaired by tomorrow morning at the latest. However, we must consume all food that could spoil today. This is a waste prevention operation. The result was the most lavish dinner in camp history. Grilled steak, fresh milk, buttered potatoes, and even ice cream. In the dining hall, there was a stunned silence at first, followed by an outburst of suppressed joy. While the adults savored this unexpected feast, the children, Sophie, Hannah, Kenji, and the others, ran around eating their ice cream. Watching this scene, Anya realized something she hadn't noticed before. These people had formed a community. What had begun with being held captive together had been strengthened by shared experiences, health checks, honey loops, and now this emergency feast. Dr. Brenner sat beside a plate of steak, observing the scene with a rare smile. Greta Faber, still a little weak but no longer ill, chatted with the other women. Colonel Bennett stood by the door, observing the scene. Anya went over to him. "Was this a planned operation, Colonel?" she asked, her tone skeptical. "To boost morale?" Bennett looked at her in unusual honesty in his eyes. "No, Dr. Kohl. It was just practical logic. It would have been foolish to throw away food that was going bad. However," he added, glancing at the mess hall, "the results were interesting. Sometimes crises strengthen the most unexpected bonds." That night, while the power was still out, the camp management handed out lanterns. Anya and Sophie sat in front of their cabin, watching the stars in the sky. The sky in Maine seemed clearer and more starry than the one in Prague. "Mom," Sophie said sleepily, her head resting on Anya's shoulder. "I had so much fun today. There was ice cream." "Yes, my darling, there was. Will we have honey loops tomorrow too?" Anya hugged her daughter tightly. "Yes," she whispered. "We will tomorrow. And the day after that, I promise." This remark prompted a new resolution within him. He was no longer a passive observer or a skeptical prisoner. He would actively defend the welfare of this community, and most of all, his daughter. This meant implementing Vance's protocol, resisting Bennett's questions, and securing a future for Sophie, even if that future was taking shape in America. The next day, when the power returned, Anya went to Vance's office. "I've been thinking about last night," she said. "These kinds of outages could happen again. We need to prepare an emergency pediatric nutrition protocol. Tinned milk, biscuits, and honey loops. It should be something the children know and trust." Vance looked at her with a surprised and pleased expression. She didn't seem to expect Anya to be so integrated with their system. "Excellent idea," he agreed. "Get started immediately. Request whatever you need." This small proactive move was a turning point for Anya. She was no longer just accepting what was given to her. She was also contributing. And her first contribution was institutionalizing the children's trust in a familiar flavor. A few days later, Bennett left the camp. Before departing, he saw Anya one last time. "Dr. Kohl, Dr. Vance insists that you continue your work. If you agree, your position could be reconsidered to a more permanent status." "What kind of status?" asked Anya. "Something like special research collaborator," said Bennett. "This would allow you to live and work outside the camp, subject to certain restrictions. Your daughter could attend a normal American school." The image of Sophie going to school, sitting in rows with other children singing English songs, flashed through Anya's mind. This was a luxury beyond honey loops, normality. "Do I have time for this?" she asked. "A few months," Bennett replied. "When the war is officially over, decisions will be made. For now, think about it." Bennett left. Anya looked out the window and saw Sophie swinging with Hannah and Kenji on a swing set Clara had built for them. Their laughter, a mixture of 3 languages, echoed in the warm air. That evening, she wrote the following in her diary. "Today, I was offered a future, here on these hostile lands, and my heart wants to say yes. Is this betrayal of my mother in Prague, of my sister? Perhaps, but they cannot even imagine the life Sophie could have here." Bennett mentioned a special collaborator. "What am I? A mother, and a mother's duty is to choose the best option for her child. Vance says it's an experiment. Bennett says it's an opportunity. I say it's Sophie's childhood. And I want to protect that childhood. The honey biscuits, the swings, the vaccinations, and the hope. It's simple. This is selfish. This is my only real choice." The next morning, when she arrived at the infirmary, Vance handed her a small package. Inside was a bottle labeled "Vitamin Supplement for Children, Orange Flavored." "New supply," said Vance. "Give one to each of your children, once a day." Anya held the bottle in her hand. It was a logical extension of the honey loops, not just to stave off hunger, but to optimize health. It was a luxury a diseased Europe could never dream of. When she gave Sophie the first vitamin, her daughter saw it as sweet candy and swallowed it happily. At that moment, Anya realized she was taking a kind of vitamin herself, the vitamin of hope. It could be poisonous or life-giving. She didn't know yet, but there was one thing she knew. She had made up her mind. Sophie's future would be shaped not in a city now lost to the past, but in this strange, abundant, unexpectedly generous camp, within this new community. And she would work to build that future, with steps as small as the golden oat rings in a child's hand, yet as vast as a nation's industrial might. The first autumn leaves painted the granite and wood of Camp Ash River red and gold. The news arrived on the morning of 2 September 1945, with a radio announcement that the formal surrender documents had been signed aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. The war was over. The camp fell into an eerie silence. There were no victory cries or tears of defeat, only the deep sigh of people who had been holding their breath for so long. What were they now officially? They were no longer enemies. So what were they? What Colonel Bennett called decisions had now become an urgent reality. The following week, the camp administration gathered all the special agents. The officer spoke clearly and dispassionately. The war was over. However, the situation in Europe was chaotic until stability was achieved. Repatriation could take months, perhaps years. During this time, Camp Resolution would continue to operate as a temporary residence, but it would no longer be a prisoner of war camp. It would be a transit center. In practice, little had changed. The barbed wire was still there. The guards were still on duty. But there was a difference in the air. Uncertainty had replaced urgency. The clear, albeit harsh rules of wartime were gone. The future was hazy and uncertain. This uncertainty created a new kind of anxiety for Anya. It was no longer the anxiety of daily survival, but the anxiety of Sophie's identity. What would become of her daughter? Would she grow up in a temporary place in the middle of nowhere? Bennett's promise of a normal school now seemed more like a necessity than a dream. One afternoon, while Clara was cleaning the nursery, Anya went over to her. "Clara, Sophie, when can she start school?" she asked. Clara put the cloth down on the table. We're talking to the local school district. But it's complicated. Your official status, parental permissions, Dr. Vance and Colonel Bennett are working on it. Clara saw the worried look on Anya's face. Don't worry, Sophie is very smart. She's learning a lot, even here. Hana taught her to count in Japanese, you know? This small achievement made Anya proud, but it also made her sad. Sophie's education shouldn't be limited to the words she learned from the other captive children. She should be learning in a well-lit classroom with notebooks and books. The honey loops had helped her maintain her childhood, but now it was time to build her future. This construction process began unexpectedly with a letter from the outside world. Anya received an official-looking envelope bearing a Philadelphia address. Inside was a letter written in very proper German from a woman named Dr. Eleanor Shaw. Dr. Shaw was a researcher working in the pediatrics department at the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Elias Vance had corresponded with her about the camp's pediatric program and mentioned Anya's work. "Dear Dr. Kohl," wrote Dr. Shaw, "I note that Dr. Vance was very impressed by your observations on the effect of nutritional interventions in children exposed to the trauma of war. Such data is extremely rare. If possible, I would like to correspond with you about some specific data points. I would also be interested to hear your thoughts on rebuilding child health programs in post-war Europe. I hope this letter does not disturb you." The letter trembled in Anya's hands. This couldn't be a trap. It was too specific, too academic. This was professional recognition. Her work was being seen as important. This thought stirred a deep sense of pride and a strange sense of belonging within her. She was moving from being an anonymous prisoner to becoming a visible professional. He found Vance in his office. He placed the letter on his desk. "Did you know about this?" he asked. Vance looked at the letter and smiled slightly. "Dr. Shaw is a leading name in his field. I met him at a pre-war conference. It seemed natural to mention your work. I hope I haven't disturbed you." "No," said Anya, slowly. "No, you didn't. It's just, I don't know what to say in reply." "Tell the truth," said Vance simply. "What you've observed, Sophie, the other children. Write that honey loops have become a symbol not just of calories, but of security and normality. This is a language Dr. Shaw will understand. It's the language of science." Anya spent the next few days meticulously preparing a reply letter in English. She described Sophie's first honey loop experience, the social interactions among the camp children, the progress of the vaccination program. As for Dr. Shaw's question, child health in post-war Europe, she wrote what came from within. The basic principles must be universal: clean water, basic vaccinations, adequate nutrition. But providing this in Germany or Czechoslovakia must be done with urgency and creativity, not with a system of abundance like we have here. Perhaps the most valuable lesson is that meeting children's physical needs forms the basis for psychological recovery. What we see here is that even a small oat ring coated in honey can lay this foundation. When she posted the letter, she felt strangely lightened. It was as if she had put a message in a bottle and thrown it into the sea. But this message carried her identity: Dr. Anya Kohl, pediatrician. This small window to the outside world coincided with the closing of another door. Greta Faber was now fully recovered and had been placed on the first list of volunteers for discharge. When the time came to part, Anya was waiting for her at the infirmary door. "I wanted to thank you, Dr. Kohl," said Faber, her eyes moist. "Not just for your care, but for showing me that there is humanity here. It changed me." "Thank you too," Anya replied sincerely. "Seeing you recover gave me hope too. Faber left. Her empty bed was filled the next day by another tuberculosis case, a displaced person from Poland. The work in the infirmary was never done. But Faber's departure was the first sign of the camp community breaking up. Everyone knew their turn would come one day. This fear of separation infected Sophie too. Hannah and Kenji's families would be sent to another camp on another transport within a few weeks. When the day of departure came, the three children clung to each other like a tree in the nursery. They didn't speak, they just hugged. Hannah gave Sophie a small cloth bag containing a few honey loops and a small, folded Japanese song sheet. "Friend," said Hannah, in English. "Friend," repeated Sophie, wiping her tears. The Japanese children left. The nursery suddenly felt quieter, emptier. Sophie spoke less, ate less for several days. Anya let her grieve. Then, one afternoon, Sophie sat at the kitchen table and counted the honey loops Hannah had given her. There were 5. "Are you going to eat them?" asked Anya. Sophie shook her head. "No, I'll keep them." She carefully put them back into the cloth bag Hannah had given her. "Sometimes you need to remember." This mature statement surprised Anya. Sophie was growing up, and this growth went beyond the simple pleasure of the honey loops, transforming them into mementos, symbols of connection in a changing world. When the first snow of winter fell, a second letter arrived from the outside world. This time, it was not from Dr. Eleanor Shaw, but from the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service. The letter was addressed to Dr. Anya Kohl and stated that, as an individual with special abilities, she was eligible to apply for permanent residency in the United States under the National Interest Waiver. The application was supported by Dr. Elias Vance and Dr. Eleanor Shaw, citing her exceptional contributions to the field of medical research. Anya read the letter over and over. Permanent residency. This meant the end of the wires, the uncertainty, the temporary residence. It meant Sophie could go to school, and she herself could perhaps work in a hospital or at a university. It meant a future. At the same time, it was a final break. From Prague, from her mother, from her past life. It was a decision to become fully integrated into the American system, to become part of it. That evening, she showed the letter to Vance. "Did you know about this?" she asked, her voice calmer now, more weary. "I started the application process," Vance admitted. "Dr. Shaw's letter was very helpful. It's not a guarantee, Anya. You'll still have to go through a review. Interviews, background checks, it could take months. But it's a chance for Sophie." Anya nodded. "I know." "What are you going to do?" asked Vance. Anya watched the snowflakes falling on the cottages outside the window. Sophie was inside, playing with Hannah's fabric bag. "I'll apply," she said finally. "Sophie needs stability, a home, a school. I need a purpose too. Working in the infirmary isn't enough. If I can work with Dr. Shaw, maybe I can help the children in Prague or Berlin, even from here, from this abundance." Vance nodded in agreement. "That's a good idea. Helping from nowhere is better than not helping at all." Filling out the application forms was like writing a detailed autobiography. Each question, place of birth, education, wartime activities, brought his past back to life. But this time, they were questioning him not as a criminal, but as a candidate. The difference was subtle but enormous. After posting the documents, Anya took Sophie by the hand, and they went to a small clearing behind their cabin, covered in snow. The air was freezing, but clear. "Sophie," said Anya, adjusting her daughter's cloak collar, "we may have to stay here a little longer, perhaps much longer." "Are we going to Prague?" Sophie asked, a look of bewilderment on her face. "Not for now. Maybe we won't go at all. Maybe we'll have a new home here in America. You'll have a school, new friends. Sophie thought about it. Friends like Hannah? Maybe, but American children too. Sophie digested this idea. Then she asked, will there still be honey loops? Anya smiled at her daughter's simple, concrete concern. Amidst all the uncertainty in the world, Sophie still clung to the most basic realities. Yes, my darling, she said, hugging her tightly. Honey loops will still be there. I promise. This promise was different from the others. It was not a hope or a consolation. It was a commitment to a new life, and Anya was determined to fulfill it. That night, as the snow continued to fall, Anya wrote in her diary for the last time about the honey loops. Today I made an official application for our future. This is a choice I made for Sophie, but it is also a choice I've made for myself. I am no longer just a victim or a prisoner. I am charting my own course. This path began with those small golden oat rings in Sophie's palm. They showed me that even an enemy can show mercy, that abundance can be as powerful as a weapon. Now, I want to go further down this path. I want to be part of that mercy. I want to use that abundance to build Sophie's future. Perhaps one day, to build the future of other children too. This is not the medicine I learned in Prague. This is the medicine I learned here, behind the barbed wire. And perhaps this is something stronger, because it is mixed with hope and with a mother's love. As winter deepened, the name Camp Ash River became increasingly ironic. For those living here, the final solution was not the return or conviction they had anticipated. Rather, it was the gradual construction of an unexpected, complex, and abundant new life. And Anya Kohl was determined to build this new life upon the solid, sweet foundation of the small, honeyed oat rings her daughter had once held.